The morning sun rested gently over the small town as people moved through their usual routines. The streets were busy, lined with stores opening their doors and workers rushing to catch the bus. Among the crowd was a woman named Mariah, a single mother who had faced more struggles in life than most could imagine. Mariah was not a woman who complained. She carried her challenges quietly, always putting her son first. Her son, Daniel, was her world. Everything she did, from working long hours to saving every coin, was for him. Daniel was a bright young man, full of dreams and determination. He had become a symbol of hope not just for Mariah, but for many in their neighborhood. That morning, Mariah walked toward the bank with a folded check in her purse. It was money she had worked hard for, payment for weeks of effort at a local diner. The check was not large, but to her, it meant groceries, bills, and a little extra for Daniel's school supplies. She stepped through the glass doors of the bank, her heart steady but her mind tired from sleepless nights. Inside the bank, the air was cool, and the line of customers was short. Mariah joined the queue, holding her purse close. She noticed the posters and advertisements hung across the walls. Smiling faces of young achievers looked back at her, promoting the bank's support for education and community growth. One of those faces looked familiar, but Mariah did not stop to study it. Her focus was on the check in her hand. When it was her turn, she walked up to the counter where a young teller stood. His name was Ryan. He was neatly dressed in the bank's uniform, his hair combed perfectly, his face serious as he adjusted his glasses. Ryan had been working at the bank for less than a year, and he was proud of his job. He had grown up in a strict family, and he believed in rules above all else. Mariah gave him a small smile and slid the check across the counter. "Good morning," she said softly. Ryan glanced at the check. His eyes narrowed. Something about the handwriting on the check and the worn edges made him suspicious. Instead of asking questions kindly, he frowned and tapped his pen against the counter. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his tone sharp. Mariah blinked, surprised by the sudden suspicion. "It's my paycheck," she replied carefully. "From the diner. I worked there all month." Ryan studied her, his expression doubtful. In his mind, the check looked different from what he usually saw. He convinced himself it might be fake. He didn't stop to consider Mariah's tired eyes or the truth in her voice. "I don't think this is real," Ryan said flatly. Mariah's heart skipped. She leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. "Please, it's real. I worked hard for this. I need to deposit it." But Ryan shook his head. Without another word, he tore the check in half, then in quarters, until the pieces lay scattered on the counter. The sound of the paper ripping seemed louder than the chatter of the bank. Mariah's hands trembled as she stared at the torn pieces. Her breath caught in her chest. Weeks of work, gone in seconds. She felt her face grow warm with humiliation. People in line behind her whispered, their eyes on her as though she had done something wrong. She wanted to explain, to defend herself, but the words stayed locked in her throat. Her voice finally cracked. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. Ryan crossed his arms, standing tall, believing he had done his duty. "We don't accept suspicious checks," he said coldly. Mariah's eyes filled with tears, but she quickly blinked them away. She would not cry here, not in front of strangers. Gathering what strength she had left, she picked up her purse and turned away. Her steps were heavy as she walked out of the bank. Outside, the sunlight felt different, too bright, almost harsh. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment, her hands shaking as she pressed them against her purse. She thought of Daniel. He was at school, probably laughing with his friends, unaware of the storm his mother faced that very moment. Mariah whispered to herself, "I can't give up. Not for him." She lifted her head, and for the first time she looked closely at the large billboard across the street. It was one of the bank's advertisements, showing a young man in a graduation gown, smiling with pride. Mariah's breath caught in her throat. Her eyes widened. The face on the billboard was her son, Daniel. The boy she had raised, the boy she had sacrificed everything for, was being celebrated as a success by the very bank that had just torn her check apart. Mariah stood frozen, staring at the giant image of her son. Her heart ached with both pride and pain. She wondered what Ryan would think if he knew the truth that the young man his bank honored was the son of the woman he had just humiliated. And deep inside, she knew this was only the beginning of a story neither of them would forget. Ryan stayed at the teller's desk, his hands still resting on the counter after tearing Mariah's check. For a moment, he felt a small sense of pride, believing he had protected the bank from fraud. To him, rules mattered more than anything. If something seemed wrong, he thought it was his duty to stop it. But as the line of customers moved forward, Ryan found his mind drifting back to the woman who had just left. He remembered her eyes tired, pleading, yet filled with quiet strength. She hadn't shouted at him, hadn't argued. Instead, she had walked away with dignity, though he had torn apart what might have been her only source of support. Something about her silence unsettled him. When his shift ended that afternoon, Ryan stepped outside the bank. The air was warm, and the streets were busy with cars and people rushing home. He stretched his shoulders and looked across the road. That was when his eyes landed on the giant billboard standing proudly above the street. It was the same one Mariah had noticed. Ryan's gaze stopped on the young man's face smiling down from the advertisement. He wore a graduation gown, his eyes shining with confidence. The text beneath read, "Daniel, a bright future with support from our community." Ryan froze. His mind replayed the moment Mariah had stood at his counter. The resemblance was undeniable. The woman's eyes, her smile, the determination she carried, it was all in the young man's face on the billboard. His chest tightened. "No, it can't be," he whispered to himself. But the more he looked, the more certain he became. The boy on the billboard was her son. Ryan's thoughts raced. Why would the bank honor this young man while his own mother was treated with suspicion? He remembered how proudly the manager had spoken weeks earlier about sponsoring local students. Daniel had been chosen as the face of their campaign, a symbol of hope and achievement. Everyone in the branch knew his name, yet Ryan had never connected the dots until now. For the first time, Ryan felt something heavy inside him, a guilt that gnawed at his chest. He had not just dismissed any customer, he had humiliated the mother of the very person his bank celebrated. He tried to shake it off, telling himself, "I only followed the rules." But the image of Mariah's trembling hands and quiet voice returned to him again and again. Rules might protect the bank, but had they protected what was right? Ryan walked slowly down the street, his eyes glued to the billboard. People passed by, some pointing at it proudly. A group of teenagers laughed and cheered as they recognized Daniel's face. "That's him," one of them said. "He's going places." Ryan stopped walking. His throat felt dry. The pride in their voices made him think about Mariah. Did she know her son's face was shining across the town? Did she feel the same pride, even after the way she had been treated today? That night, Ryan could not sleep. He tossed and turned, the sound of the tearing check echoing in his mind. He kept seeing Mariah's eyes, filled with hurt but also with something stronger, love for her son. He realized that he had looked at her check with suspicion, but he had never looked at her as a person. The next morning, Ryan arrived at the bank earlier than usual. He sat at his desk, staring at the computer screen, but his thoughts were elsewhere. When the manager walked by, Ryan almost spoke up but hesitated. His pride and fear of being judged held him back. By noon, however, he couldn't take it anymore. During his break, Ryan stepped outside again and stood in front of the billboard. The sun made the colors glow brighter, Daniel's smile seeming even more alive. At that moment, Ryan made a decision. He couldn't undo what he had done, but he could try to make it right. Later that day, Mariah returned to the bank. She had gathered her courage, carrying another copy of her paycheck that the diner manager had kindly reissued after hearing what had happened. Her steps were steady, though her heart was heavy. She did not want to face the teller again, but she knew she had no choice. As she entered the bank, she immediately noticed Ryan behind the counter. Their eyes met for a second, and she looked away quickly, focusing on her purse. She joined the line, waiting quietly. Ryan felt his chest tighten again. His chance had come. He could not let her leave the bank this time without trying to fix the mistake. When it was finally her turn, Mariah stepped up to the counter. She placed the new check gently on the surface, her face calm but distant. Ryan picked it up carefully, his hands trembling slightly. For the first time, his voice softened. "Good afternoon, ma'am," he said. I want to apologize for yesterday." Mariah looked at him, surprised. She didn't speak, only watched him with guarded eyes. Ryan took a deep breath. "I was wrong. I didn't see you. I only saw a piece of paper. And I destroyed something you worked hard for. I'm sorry." Silence stretched between them. Mariah studied his face, searching for truth in his words. She said nothing, but her eyes softened slightly, though her pain was still visible. Ryan swallowed hard and added quietly, "I know who your son is." He glanced toward the billboard outside the window. "Daniel. The whole town is proud of him. And it's because of you." Mariah's lips parted, but no words came. She followed his gaze to the window where her son's smiling face shone down from the billboard. For a moment, time seemed to pause. Both of them stood there, the teller and the mother, connected by a mistake, a truth, and a son who had unknowingly brought them face to face with their own choices. And though Mariah remained silent, Ryan knew this was just the start of the lesson he had to learn. The silence between Mariah and Ryan at the counter stretched longer than either expected. Ryan's apology had been sincere, but for Mariah, the wound was still fresh. She looked at him with calm eyes, though inside her heart was a storm. Her son's face beamed proudly from the billboard outside, but the memory of the torn check was sharp, painful. She had worked so hard for that money. She had walked into the bank with hope and dignity, only to leave broken. Now the same teller stood in front of her, offering words, but could words repair the damage? Mariah slowly took a breath. "Please just process the check," she said quietly. Her voice was steady, but there was a distance in her tone, as if a wall had risen between them. Ryan nodded quickly. He handled the check carefully this time, typing into the system with extra attention. His usual strictness was gone. Instead, every movement showed his desire to prove he was different from the man she had met yesterday. The transaction went through smoothly. Ryan slid the receipt back to her. "It's deposited," he said softly. Mariah picked up the slip of paper. She gave him a small nod but did not smile. She turned to leave. But Ryan could not let her walk out again. "Wait," he said, his voice almost desperate. Mariah paused, her hand resting on her purse. She looked back at him, her expression unreadable. "I know I hurt you," Ryan continued. "I thought I was doing my job, but I forgot you are a person first, not just a name on paper. I don't expect you to forgive me today, but I hope one day you will." Mariah studied him in silence. For a moment, she almost spoke, but then she turned and walked away. As she left the bank, Ryan felt a heavy weight settle on his chest. He had apologized, but forgiveness was not something that came quickly. Especially when trust had been broken. That evening, Mariah sat by the window in her small apartment. Daniel was at the kitchen table, finishing his homework. His books were spread out, and his pen moved quickly across the page. Mariah watched him, her heart softening. He was the reason she kept fighting every day. Seeing his face on the billboard had filled her with pride, but also with a reminder everything he had achieved came from years of sacrifice, years of quiet struggle. Daniel looked up and noticed her staring. He smiled. "What is it, Mom?" Mariah shook her head lightly. "Nothing. Just thinking about how proud I am of you." Daniel laughed softly. "You say that every week." "And I mean it every week," she replied, her voice tender. For a moment, the pain of the bank faded, replaced by warmth. Yet deep inside, she still carried the sting of humiliation. She thought about Ryan's apology. His eyes had looked honest, almost regretful. But could she truly forgive? Was it right to let go so easily? She leaned back in her chair, remembering something her mother used to say: "Forgiveness is not about forgetting the wrong. It's about freeing your own heart from carrying it forever." Mariah sighed. She wanted peace, but the wound was too new. Meanwhile, Ryan sat alone in his apartment, staring at the ceiling. He replayed the moment at the bank over and over again. He thought of Mariah's silence, her quiet dignity. He wanted to do more than just say sorry. He wanted to show her that he understood her pain. But how? As he scrolled through his phone, his eyes landed on an article shared by the bank's official page. It was about Daniel, the young man on the billboard. The article told the story of how he had overcome struggles, how his mother had been his greatest supporter, and how the community was proud of him. Ryan's chest tightened as he read. The article described Mariah's sacrifices, her strength, her love. The very woman he had doubted was now celebrated publicly as the foundation of Daniel's success. Ryan closed his eyes. He felt smaller than ever. The next day, Mariah returned to her routine. She went to the diner for her shift, smiling politely to customers, serving food with patience. But her mind drifted often. Every time she remembered the check being torn, her stomach tightened. During her short break, she stepped outside for air. Across the street, another copy of the same billboard stood tall. Daniel's face shone proudly again. People passing by pointed at it, speaking with admiration. Mariah whispered to herself, "Yes, that's my son." Pride warmed her, but the sting of yesterday's memory lingered. That afternoon, Ryan made a decision. He went to his manager. Nervously, he explained what had happened. He told the truth that he had misjudged a customer, destroyed her check, and treated her unfairly. The manager frowned but listened carefully. "Ryan, this is serious," he said. "We represent trust. Our customers depend on us." Ryan lowered his head. "I know. I can't take back what I did. But I want to make it right. Not just with words." The manager sighed. After a pause, he said, "Then find a way. Show her that you and this bank respect her." Ryan nodded. It was not going to be easy, but he felt a spark of determination. That night, Mariah sat with Daniel again, helping him review for a test. Her heart felt torn between the pain of yesterday and the quiet hope of tomorrow. She didn't know that, at the same time, Ryan was sitting in his own room, planning how to restore the dignity he had taken from her. Two lives, connected by a mistake, were slowly being pulled toward a moment of truth. And though Mariah had not yet spoken the word forgive, deep inside she wondered if one day, she might. The following morning, the bank opened its doors to another busy day. Customers came in and out, carrying checks, filling forms, and asking questions. Ryan stood at his usual counter, but his mind was not at ease. Every smile he gave, every transaction he processed, felt heavy with guilt. He wanted to fix what he had broken. The image of Mariah's quiet face stayed with him. She had not shouted, had not demanded anything. Her silence was stronger than anger, and that silence reminded him every moment that he had failed her. During his lunch break, Ryan left the bank and walked toward the diner. It was the same diner Mariah worked at, and he knew it from the article he had read about Daniel. His steps were nervous, his heart racing. He had never done something like this before. When he entered, the smell of coffee and warm food filled the air. Customers sat in booths, chatting softly. At the far end of the room, Mariah moved between tables, carrying plates with steady hands. Her uniform was simple, her expression calm, but Ryan could see the exhaustion in her eyes. For a moment, he hesitated. He wondered if coming here was a mistake. But then he remembered his manager's words, "Show her that you respect her." He walked toward the counter and took a seat. One of the other waitresses came over, but before Ryan could order, Mariah noticed him. Her steps slowed. She did not speak right away, her eyes showed recognition, and with it, a wall of caution. Finally, she approached. "What can I get you?" Her voice was polite but distant, the same tone she used for strangers. Ryan swallowed. "Coffee, please," he said softly. Then after a pause, he added, "And, if you have a moment, I'd like to talk." Mariah gave him a quick, unreadable look, then walked away without answering. When she returned with the coffee, she placed the cup gently on the counter. "This is not the place for bank matters," she said firmly. Ryan nodded. "I understand. But this isn't about the bank. It's about respect. I owe you more than an apology behind a counter." Mariah stood still for a moment. Her eyes softened slightly, but her guard remained. "I don't have time for long talks. I have work." "I won't take much of your time," Ryan said quickly. "I just want you to know. I read the article about your son. He is inspiring. And everything he is today is because of you. I should have seen that before." Mariah's hand tightened around her notepad. For years, she had worked quietly, never expecting praise, only doing what was necessary for her son. Hearing recognition from the very person who had humiliated her felt strange, almost unsettling. She met his eyes. "Words are easy," she said quietly. Ryan nodded, accepting her truth. "Then let me show you through actions." Mariah did not answer. She turned away to serve another table, leaving Ryan with his coffee. But even without words, Ryan felt a small step had been made. She had listened. That evening, Ryan sat at his desk, searching for ways to honor Mariah properly. He thought of the billboard, of the pride in Daniel's face, and of the way the community celebrated his story. And he realized something: Mariah deserved that recognition too. The bank had chosen Daniel as a symbol of success, but behind that success stood a mother whose sacrifices had gone unnoticed. Ryan drafted an idea. He wrote to his manager, suggesting a community appreciation program that honored parents who worked tirelessly for their children's futures. He explained that Daniel's story was incomplete without his mother's role. When his manager read the proposal, he raised his eyebrows. "This is unusual," he said. "It's right," Ryan replied firmly. "She deserves to be seen." The manager thought for a moment, then gave a slow nod. "Prepare the details. If we do this, it must be sincere." Ryan felt hope rise in his chest. Meanwhile, Mariah returned home late from the diner. Daniel greeted her with his usual smile, pulling her into a quick hug. "Mom," he said excitedly, "my teacher showed the whole class the billboard today. Everyone clapped for me." Mariah's tired face lit up with joy. "That's wonderful, Daniel." He grinned. "I told them I couldn't have done it without you." Her heart swelled. Tears touched her eyes, but she brushed them away quickly. "I'm proud of you, son." As she watched him that night, she thought again about Ryan's visit. His words echoed in her mind, "I should have seen that before." She was not ready to forgive, but a small part of her wondered if people could truly change. 2 days later, Mariah received a letter in her mailbox. It was from the bank. Her heart tightened as she held the envelope, but when she opened it, her eyes widened. Inside was an invitation to a special event, celebrating the strength of families in our community. Her name was listed as a guest of honor. Mariah's breath caught. She read the letter again, hardly believing it. For the first time, someone had recognized her not as just a worker, not as just a struggling mother, but as the foundation of her son's success. She sat down at her kitchen table, the letter trembling in her hands. Daniel noticed her expression and asked, "What's wrong, Mom?" Mariah smiled softly, her voice breaking with emotion. "Nothing's wrong, Daniel. For once, something feels right." And though she did not say it aloud, she knew who was behind this gesture. The teller who had once torn her check was now trying to piece together something far more important: her dignity. The day of the community event arrived with clear skies and gentle air. The bank's large hall had been decorated with banners and flowers. A stage stood at the front, with rows of chairs neatly arranged for the guests. Posters lined the walls showing smiling families, students, and community workers. For Mariah, walking into that hall felt unreal. She wore her best dress, a simple blue one she had saved for special days. Her hair was neatly tied back, and though her shoes were worn, she carried herself with quiet grace. Daniel walked proudly beside her, holding her hand. "Mom, look," Daniel said excitedly, pointing to a banner. His own face was printed there, smiling in a graduation gown. Mariah's heart swelled with pride. But at the same time, she felt a knot in her stomach. She wondered if this event was truly about honoring families, or if it was simply another way for the bank to show its good image. Ryan stood near the entrance, greeting guests. When he saw Mariah and Daniel walk in, his breath caught. She looked strong, dignified, and he knew this moment was important. Gathering his courage, he stepped forward. "Good evening, ma'am." "Daniel," he said softly. Mariah gave him a brief nod, polite but reserved. She was not here for him, she was here for her son and for herself. Still, she could sense his sincerity. Daniel, unaware of the history between them, smiled brightly. "Hi, sir." Ryan smiled back, but his eyes lingered on Mariah. He wanted to say more, but this was not the time. Tonight was about her. The program began with speeches from community leaders. They spoke about hard work, education, and the importance of family support. Applause filled the hall after every speech. Then the bank manager stepped onto the stage. His voice carried through the hall as he said, "Tonight, we celebrate not just students, but the families who stand behind them. Success does not come alone, it grows from love, sacrifice, and strength." Mariah listened quietly, her hands folded in her lap. She never expected to hear words that described her life so closely. The manager continued, "One such story is very dear to us. Many of you know Daniel, whose bright future inspires us all. But behind Daniel's success is a mother whose strength and sacrifices shaped him. Tonight, we honor her." Mariah. The audience turned toward her, clapping warmly. Daniel squeezed her hand with excitement. "That's you, Mom." Mariah's eyes widened. For a moment, she sat frozen. Her chest tightened as emotion rushed over her. She had never been recognized this way before. Slowly, she rose to her feet, her steps trembling as she walked toward the stage. Ryan watched from the side, his eyes shining. This was the moment he had hoped for, not for himself, but for her. On stage, the manager handed Mariah a small plaque that read, "With gratitude to Mariah, whose strength is the foundation of success." Tears filled her eyes as the audience applauded. She held the plaque close, unable to find words. When she looked into the crowd, she saw Daniel beaming proudly, clapping louder than anyone. For Mariah, that moment felt like a new chapter. For years, she had worked quietly, unnoticed. Now, for the first time, her sacrifices were seen. After the ceremony, guests gathered to talk and share food. Many came to congratulate Mariah, thanking her for being an example of strength. She smiled politely, her heart still heavy with emotion. Ryan approached slowly, holding 2 cups of water. "You must be tired," he said gently, offering her one. Mariah hesitated before taking it. "Thank you." For a moment, they stood in silence. Then Ryan spoke carefully. "I wanted this event because I needed you to be recognized. Not just by me, but by everyone. What I did that day at the bank, it was wrong. I can never erase it. But I wanted you to know I see you now. I respect you." Mariah looked at him, her eyes soft but cautious. "Respect should have been there from the start," she said quietly. Ryan lowered his head. "You're right. I failed. But I want to do better." Her heart wavered. She could hear truth in his voice, but the memory of the torn check still stung. Forgiveness was not simple. It was not something that could be handed out in a single evening. Still, she looked at him and said, "Change takes time. If your actions are true, time will show it." Ryan nodded. He did not ask for more. Later that night, as Mariah and Daniel walked home, the cool air brushed against their faces. Daniel swung the plaque gently in his hand. "Mom, you were amazing up there," he said with excitement. "Everyone knows now how strong you are." Mariah smiled softly, her heart full. "I don't need everyone to know, Daniel. I just need you to know." "I always knew," he replied quickly. Her eyes filled with tears at his words. She hugged him tightly. In that moment, she realized that while the world's recognition felt good, the only recognition she had ever truly needed was already there in her son's love and pride. Ryan, meanwhile, returned to his apartment. He sat by the window, replaying the night in his mind. He had seen Mariah shine, had seen her strength acknowledged by many. And though she had not forgiven him yet, he felt a quiet hope. Forgiveness could not be forced. It had to be earned. And for the first time in his life, Ryan understood that respect was not about rules or appearances, it was about seeing the human heart. He whispered to himself, "I will prove it. Even if it takes time." And with that promise, both Ryan and Mariah moved forward 2 lives, slowly learning what dignity, respect, and healing truly meant. A week after the community event, life slowly returned to routine. Mariah went back to the diner, working her shifts, while Daniel stayed busy with his studies. The plaque she had received rested on a small shelf in their living room. Every time Mariah glanced at it, her heart filled with quiet pride. But the memory of the bank incident still lingered, reminding her that wounds took time to heal. Ryan, too, returned to his daily duties at the bank. On the surface, everything looked the same: lines of customers, stacks of checks, and polite greetings. Yet inside, Ryan was different. His view of people had changed. Every customer who stood before him was no longer just a transaction, but a person with a story. But Ryan knew change was not proven by thoughts. It had to be shown through actions. One afternoon, a heavy rainstorm rolled across town. The diner grew crowded as people rushed inside to escape the downpour. Mariah moved quickly, wiping tables and bringing food. Daniel had stayed late at school for a project, and she knew he would be walking home in the storm. Her heart worried as she poured coffee for a customer. At the same time, Ryan was finishing his shift at the bank. As he left, umbrella in hand, he noticed a group of students huddled near the bus stop. The rain poured heavily, and buses were running late. Among them, Ryan saw a familiar face: Daniel. Daniel's hair was soaked, and his backpack clung to him. He tried to shield his books under his arm, but water dripped down his sleeves. Ryan's heart tightened. He thought of Mariah's tired eyes, her constant sacrifices. He could not just walk past. Ryan stepped closer. Daniel. The boy looked up, surprised. Oh, hi, sir. You're from the bank, right? Ryan nodded. Yes. You'll catch a cold standing here. Do you want me to give you a ride home? Daniel hesitated. His mother had always taught him to be careful, but Ryan's voice carried warmth. After a pause, Daniel nodded. Thank you. Ryan led him to his car, handing him a dry towel from the back seat. As they drove, Ryan tried to keep his tone light. You're working hard at school, I hear. Daniel smiled. Yes. I want to study engineering one day. Ryan's chest filled with admiration. That's a wonderful dream. And you'll achieve it, I'm sure of it. The car grew quiet for a moment. Then Daniel said softly, my mom is the reason I keep going. She always believes in me, even when things are hard. Ryan swallowed. He wanted to say he already knew, but he simply nodded. She's an incredible woman. When they arrived, Mariah was standing at the doorway, worry written across her face. The moment she saw Daniel step out of the car, safe and dry, relief flooded her features. But when she saw Ryan behind the wheel, her body stiffened. Daniel rushed inside, saying quickly, Mom, he gave me a ride. The rain was too heavy. Mariah looked at Ryan, her eyes cautious but grateful. Thank you, she said quietly. Ryan stepped out into the rain, not caring that his suit was getting wet. I didn't want him to get sick. He has too much ahead of him. Mariah studied him for a long moment. Her heart softened slightly. You did the right thing, she admitted. Ryan nodded, not expecting more. I'll go now. Take care. As he drove away, Mariah stood in the rain for a moment, holding her son close. For the first time, she felt Ryan's actions carried truth. Days passed, and Mariah's view of Ryan began to shift, though she kept it hidden. She saw he was trying not with grand gestures, but with small, steady actions. Each time she went to the bank now, Ryan greeted her with genuine respect. No more suspicion, no more coldness. Only kindness. One afternoon, Mariah overheard two customers at the diner talking about the bank. The young teller there, one said, he really takes his job seriously, but he's kind too. He helped me sort my payment issue without making me feel small. Mariah listened quietly, her mind thoughtful. Could it be that Ryan was not only changing with her, but with everyone? That evening, she told Daniel about it. He smiled. Maybe people can change, Mom. You always tell me everyone deserves a second chance if they work for it. Mariah gave him a small smile, though doubt lingered. Yes, but second chances are not given lightly. They have to be earned. A week later, another test arrived. At the bank, a customer became upset when his paperwork was delayed. He raised his voice at Ryan, accusing him of incompetence. The whole lobby grew tense. Mariah happened to be there, standing a few counters away. She watched closely, remembering how Ryan had once treated her. This time, Ryan did not lose patience. He listened carefully, spoke calmly, and resolved the issue without disrespect. He even apologized, though the mistake had not been his. The customer left calmer, and the room relaxed. Mariah's eyes softened as she saw this. For the first time, she believed his change was not temporary. When she left the bank, Ryan followed her out into the street. May I walk you part of the way? He asked gently. Mariah hesitated but then nodded. As they walked, the silence between them felt different, lighter. Finally, she said, You've been trying. I can see it. Actions speak louder than words, and your actions are starting to mean something. Ryan's chest filled with relief. Thank you, he said softly. Mariah glanced at him. Her heart was not yet ready to forgive completely, but the walls she had built were slowly lowering. For the first time, she thought forgiveness might one day be possible. And though neither spoke it aloud, both knew something important: the true test of change was not in one moment, but in many. And Ryan was learning, step by step, to pass that test. Weeks passed after the rainy day when Ryan had given Daniel a ride home. Each day, Mariah noticed subtle changes not just in Ryan's behavior at the bank, but in her own heart. The anger she had carried slowly softened into cautious understanding. She realized that respect and change were not sudden, they came gradually, step by step. One afternoon, Mariah received a phone call from the bank. The voice on the other side was polite and warm. "Mariah, we are hosting a small appreciation luncheon for community families, and we would love for you and Daniel to attend." Mariah glanced at Daniel, who was excited beyond words. "Mom, this sounds amazing." She smiled softly. "Yes, it does. Let's go." The luncheon was held in a modest hall. Tables were arranged neatly, decorated with flowers and colorful tablecloths. Families from across the town filled the room. There was laughter, chatter, and the smell of freshly prepared food. Mariah and Daniel entered, carrying their smiles cautiously, aware that this was another moment of public recognition. Ryan was there, standing quietly near the entrance. When he saw them, his face lit up with a small, genuine smile. He walked over and greeted them politely. "Good afternoon, Mariah." "Daniel," he said softly. "I'm glad you could make it." Mariah nodded. Her heart was still guarded, but the sincerity in his eyes made it easier to believe. The event began with speeches, thanking parents for their support, and celebrating children's accomplishments. Daniel's story was shared again, highlighting not only his achievements but the dedication of the mother who had shaped him. When Mariah's name was mentioned, the applause filled the hall. She walked to the stage, Daniel by her side. Her heart pounded as she held the plaque from before, feeling the warmth of recognition but also the weight of the journey that had brought her here. After the speeches, the bank manager stepped aside to allow Ryan a few words. He cleared his throat nervously. "Mariah," he said, his voice soft but firm, "I want to say something important. I treated you unfairly in the past. I doubted you, and I destroyed something that mattered deeply to you. I cannot undo what happened, but I have learned from it. I hope my actions since then have shown my respect for you and your sacrifices. And if you can find it in your heart to forgive me, it would mean more than words can express." Mariah stood silently. The room seemed to fade for a moment as she looked at Ryan. His eyes held no arrogance, no excuses, only honesty. She thought of the weeks that had passed, the ride home in the rain, his careful behavior at the bank, his efforts to create the community recognition program. Actions, not words. Slowly, she took a deep breath. "Ryan," she began, her voice gentle but steady, "I have seen your actions. You have shown respect, not just with words, but with everything you've done since that day. I forgive you." The room seemed to hold its breath. Ryan's face softened, relief washing over him. "Thank you," he whispered. After the formalities, the families mingled. Children ran around, laughing, sharing stories. Parents exchanged experiences and smiles. Mariah watched Daniel play with other children, her heart full. Ryan approached again, carrying 2 cups of water. "Here," he said softly, offering one to Mariah. "Just, for you." She took it, nodding slightly. "Thank you." For the first time, there was no tension between them. Only understanding, respect, and the quiet acknowledgement that people could change, and wounds could heal with time. As the luncheon ended, Mariah and Daniel walked toward their car. The sunlight shone softly through the trees, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves. "Mom," Daniel said, swinging his backpack over his shoulder, "I'm glad you were recognized today. Everyone should know how amazing you are." Mariah smiled, holding his hand. "It's not just about being recognized, Daniel. It's about knowing your worth and being proud of the love and effort you give every day." He looked up at her, eyes shining. "I'm proud of you too, Mom. Always." Tears gathered in her eyes, but they were tears of joy this time. Her heart, once weighed down by hurt, felt lighter. She realized that forgiveness did not erase the past, but it allowed her to embrace the future. Later that evening, as they returned home, Mariah placed the plaque on the shelf beside the first one. She looked at them, thinking of the journey they represented, the struggles, the resilience, and the recognition of her sacrifices. Ryan, meanwhile, returned to his apartment. He reflected on the events of the past weeks. He had made mistakes, but he had learned that true respect was earned, not assumed. He whispered quietly to himself, "This is only the beginning of doing what's right." In the quiet of the night, both Mariah and Ryan felt a sense of peace. One had been hurt, one had sought redemption, and both had found a measure of understanding. And in the center of it all, Daniel, bright, proud, and full of hope, was a reminder that love, sacrifice, and forgiveness could change lives. The billboard that once only reflected achievement now symbolized something deeper: a mother's unwavering strength, a son's bright future, and the human capacity for growth, respect, and healing. And though the journey had been difficult, they had learned that sometimes the most meaningful victories are not measured by money, recognition, or appearances, but by the courage to face mistakes, the willingness to forgive, and the heart to embrace hope.